Park historian Jim Ogden stands forward-facing in uniform of a tan flat hat, gray shirt, and green trousers. He stands on the large rocked bank of the Tennessee River. On the other side of the river is a wooded area and the entrance to South Chickamauga Creek. Down the river, on his left, a little ways, rises Lookout Mountain.
Hello. And for those of you all who joined us yesterday or the day before to participate in this year's virtual anniversary of the battles for Chattanooga in November of 1863, welcome back. For those of you all who might be joining us for the first time this year because of the COVID-19 pandemic, our anniversary programs are all virtual in form. For the last 2 days, we've covered the first 2 days of the 3 days of the battles for Chattanooga. And now today, on Wednesday, November the 25th, a Wednesday in 1863 and a Wednesday in 2020, and on the eve of Thanksgiving, both 157 years ago and today, we're going to look at the Battle of Missionary Ridge. Now, some of you all might have already immediately recognized that we're not necessarily at a point that is really critical, or that is a real point of Wednesday, November the 25th, 1863. We stand here on the north bank of the Tennessee River, just a little bit upstream of the mouth of South Chickamauga Creek. And we're looking across towards the south bank of the river at what was in Grant's original plan, the most important part of his offensive against Braxton Bragg. As Grant had devised his plan, taking advantage of the fact that some of his old troops of the Army of the Tennessee, elements of the 15th and 17th Corps, were marching eastward to the Chattanooga area under the command of his most trusted subordinate, William Tecumseh Sherman, that as those troops marched into the Chattanooga region, coming in from the west and coming into Lookout Valley, that they could cross the Tennessee River on the pontoon bridge at Brown's Ferry and then move into the hills of Stringer's Ridge on the north side of the Tennessee River, due north of the town of Chattanooga, and then once massed be in a position to, on cue, move over to the banks of the Tennessee River upstream of Chattanooga and take part in an amphibious assault across the Tennessee River to then move over and strike the Confederate right flank from southward along the western face of Missionary Ridge. And the point that was selected by Ulysses S. Grant and the Army of the Cumberland's chief engineer, William F. Baldy Smith, and the Army of the Cumberland commander, George Thomas, and others, and which was shown Sherman when he finally arrived himself in the Chattanooga area, initially ahead of his troops to scout the upcoming operation. The point selected was here at the mouth of South Chickamauga Creek. And they made the decision to land on both sides of the creek so as to have the creek as a secure flank for Sherman's own assault initially, and also so that they could send a cavalry force on a raid to break up the railroad and telegraph communications between Braxton Bragg at Chattanooga and the Confederate force that Bragg had sent up to try to recapture Knoxville. And so in this plan that Grant has developed, the engineers in Chattanooga have constructed some additional pontoon boats, more than 90 additional boats, along with 25 of the true U.S. Army style pontoon boats that have been brought in from out to the west. These 116 boats have, over the last several days, been carried northward behind the hills of Stringer's Ridge and relaunched in North Chickamauga Creek. And along with a brigade of Sherman's troops under Giles Smith, those men will be the amphibious assault force. Now, as you have heard over the last couple of days' programs, Grant's plan for these battles in November has had to be postponed from day to day because of the slow final approach march of Sherman's men into the area. A march that was slowed by the poor condition of the road between Bridgeport and Lookout Valley, by the heavy rains that had fallen in October and November, including rain on just the last couple of these days, and Sherman's own less than efficient management of that march. But finally, on November the 23rd, Sherman has gotten the majority of his troops into hiding in the hills of Stringer's Ridge, and Grant, concerned that Bragg might be trying to get away from Chattanooga, and hence his assault that afternoon on Orchard Knob, Grant orders that the main attack be launched on November the 24th. And even before Joseph Hooker began to plan in the pre-dawn hours of the 24th his last-minute attack on the Confederates on Lookout Mountain, Sherman's men were moving forward in the execution of the plan to assault across the river at this point. In addition to the pontoon boats themselves that have been carried up the river to North Chickamauga Creek, the engineers have also brought wagon load after wagon load of the other necessary bridging equipment to a point in the hills of Stringer's Ridge, just opposite of where the bridge is going to be constructed. And Sherman's men, troops of Morgan L. Smith's division, John E. Smith's division, and Hugh Ewing's division, they march out of their camps in the hills of Stringer's Ridge, essentially along Memorial Drive in Red Bank today, and they march towards this designated crossing point. They have been cautioned to be quiet. Picks and shovels and axes have been issued to select soldiers through the command so that they will have the tools with which to build field fortifications. The Army of the Cumberland has cobbled together enough horses capable of moving several artillery batteries, and they have been put into position on the tops of some of the hills overlooking this crossing point, and Sherman's own artillery is moved with the troops down close to the bank of the river. And about 2 a.m., launching out of North Chickamauga Creek, comes that 116-boat pontoon flotilla carrying the men of Giles Smith's brigade with the current, under the cover of darkness, hugging the north shore of the river, riding on a nearly bank-full river. They float down the river towards this area. The Federals had, over these preceding days, carefully noted the location of the Confederate picket stations along the river here, and groups of boats within this 116-boat flotilla have been designated particular points to cross. As they approach the area, a signal fire is lit on the north shore of the river, an indication of where the boats should then begin to turn towards the south shore. So carefully had they scouted the Confederate picket locations, so lackadaisical had the Confederate pickets become, that the boats are able to land in between the picket stations, and then the men climb out and go ashore and capture the Confederate pickets. In fact, one officer says that of the 14 picket stations that they were tasked with capturing, they got 13 of the 14 without a shot being fired. And that one shot, because it was just a sole shot, did not rouse the Confederate picket reserve. And Sherman's men essentially land on the south side of the river, uncontested, unopposed, and even to a large degree unobserved by the overall Confederate command. As soon as those soldiers are ashore, they push inland and secure the immediate landing area, and the empty pontoon boats are rowed across the river, where additional soldiers are loaded into them and rowed across the river as well. Sherman himself is anxious about the nature of this effort. He is there on the riverbank, offering the advice to the men and how to load the boats and move over expeditiously. Some of the initial officers going over, knowing that they might have to fight to retain hold of the riverbank, they want their animals across the river as quickly as possible too, and soldiers are tasked to make that happen. The animals are led down to the riverbank, and then by their reins and halter ropes are pulled into the water. And a soldier then holds the horse's head, leaning over the side of the boat, holds the horse's head against the side of the pontoon boat, and other soldiers row the pontoon boat out into the river. And soon the horse's hooves no longer touch the bottom of the river, and the horse is forced to swim. They've got over 1,200 feet to go across the river. The river is running high and fast. It is full of rainwater. It's now November. The water is cool. And by the time the horses get to the other side of the river, both through the hypothermic effects of being in the cooler water and from all of the exertion, they are nearly spent. And men have to literally pull them out of the river and onto the shore. Lead them around a short time before they are any good to once again be ridden. But this ferrying of troops back and forth across the river in the pontoon boats will by dawn have 8,000 Union soldiers on the other side of the river. And shortly after dawn, the small steamboat Dunbar, which had been in Chattanooga and been repaired, comes huffing and puffing, wheezing its way up the river, and it joins the ferrying operation, and another 4,000 troops cross the river, while the engineers begin to anchor the pontoon boats side by side to construct a 1,200-foot-long pontoon bridge across the river. This crossing is going to get Sherman's 3 divisions over the river with hardly any shots being fired at all, no serious opposition, and in a position to then move towards the Confederate right flank along the western base of Missionary Ridge. This is a part of the Chattanooga battlefields today, which is not a part of Chickamauga and Chattanooga National Military Park, but because of a Chattanooga City Park here on the north side of the river where we are right now, and the Tennessee River Walk and the South Chickamauga Creek Greenway from the River Point trailhead, you can get to a point at the mouth of South Chickamauga Creek and literally stand right where some of those Union soldiers landed in the execution of this operation. A vital part of Grant's plan for what becomes the Battle of Missionary Ridge.
Park historian Jim Ogden now stands forward-facing at the edge of a wooded area. Through a slight clearing in the woods, another wooded hill is visible in the distance.
We stand now on the northern tip of Tunnel Hill, the spur that juts out northward from the very crest or crown of what becomes known as Tunnel Hill. And while it is difficult to see beyond me through the trees, the foliage, you may be able to make out the crest of what becomes known as Billy Goat Hill, and more specifically for the view that you have, that portion of it that becomes known amongst the Union soldiers as Alexander's Hill. On the 24th of November, Sherman had wound up crossing the Tennessee River very expeditiously. And while by noon the pontoon bridge was finished and wheeled vehicles, some additional artillery, but in particular the ordnance wagons carrying additional ammunition, the ambulances and the medical wagons bringing over the necessary medical supplies to set up the division field hospitals for the anticipated action, they begin to cross. In early afternoon, Sherman then lines up his 3 divisions and will advance them towards what he thought was the north end of Missionary Ridge. By the 24th, the Confederate right flank along Missionary Ridge had been extended further northward, and so Sherman was going to have to make kind of a different swing to be able to strike towards that Confederate right flank. One thing that Grant and William F. Baldy Smith, the engineer, and George Thomas and Sherman himself, really no Federal observer could see from any point that they could reach before the initiation of the action, was that the line of Missionary Ridge here at its north end was not continuous. What appeared to be the northernmost hill of Missionary Ridge was indeed a truly separated or detached hill, that there was a large draw or ravine between that hill and the continuous line of Missionary Ridge. And you were looking down beyond me into that draw or ravine. And Sherman, on the afternoon of November the 24th, that rainy, foggy, misty, drizzly day, that day whose weather is recognized usually in association with the Battle of Lookout Mountain, but it was affecting Sherman as well. Sherman's men moved from their riverbank crossing point directly towards what they thought was the north end of Missionary Ridge. They will move forward through some farm fields and then wooded and even swampy terrain and climb up onto the top of that northernmost hill. The hill that you can see beyond me there, only to be surprised that that hill actually extends further to the east to another knoll, which they come to call Lightburn's Hill, and that separating that hill from the main line of Missionary Ridge is this large draw or ravine through which today runs Highway 58 or Campbell Street. As they occupy Billy Goat Hill, the Confederates are beginning to actually fortify Tunnel Hill. In fact, there had been a skirmish with some Confederate troops, men of Brigadier General James A. Smith's brigade of Cleburne's division, that were trying to reach the top of of Billy Goat Hill. Smith's men withdraw and begin to dig in along Tunnel Hill, stretching southward from this point. But by the time Sherman had occupied Billy Goat Hill in the afternoon of the 24th and learned about this draw or ravine, it was really too late in the day to make a true assault against the new and developing Confederate positions here on Tunnel Hill. Braxton Bragg had responded to the reports of the Federal crossings near the mouth of South Chickamauga Creek by early afternoon on the 24th, ordering Patrick Cleburne to bring his division northward from the position where it had been located along Missionary Ridge in the area of Shallowford Road and stretching southward to Bragg's headquarters, to march it northward and extend the Confederate right flank even further to the north. And they were just arriving as Sherman's men occupy Billy Goat Hill. And now, faced with Federals on that hill on the other side of the ravine, Patrick Cleburne will begin to position his available 3 brigades to defend a long stretch of Missionary Ridge, with James A. Smith's Texans taking position along Tunnel Hill itself. Because of the weather that day, And because we are approaching the latter part of December, just about 3 weeks away from the shortest day of the year, it got darker earlier that day, and Sherman was not able to launch any assaults on the 24th, as Grant had so wanted him to do. And so Sherman's men will spend the night fortifying their positions on Billy Goat Hill, while Cleburne, joined by the Corps Commander William Joseph Hardee and his men, work on their fortifications on Tunnel Hill and adjacent hills as well. When morning came on the 25th, the rain of the 24th, the change in temperature caused a ground fog to rise, and while it got light, visibility was very limited, and Sherman has to postpone launching his attacks from right at dawn to 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. and is really approaching 10 a.m. before the sun of this clear day, the 25th, burns off enough of that ground fog, forces it back down to the ground, that there is sufficient visibility to attack the Confederates on Tunnel Hill. And Sherman orders James Lightburn, whose troops were on the eastern knob or knoll of Billy Goat Hill, to attack with 200 men. And Lightburn details a portion of his brigade to that assault, and they are going to attack down the slope of the hill, across the ravine, driving the Texas skirmishers back, and driving southward towards Confederate positions. At the same time, John Corse's brigade, which had occupied part of Alexander's Hill overnight, is ordered to move down, and Corse's brigade, just shy of 1,000 men, will form up into several lines and rush forward towards Confederate positions as well. And finally, on the morning of the 25th of November, a little after 10 a.m., Grant's attacks against the Confederate right flank along Missionary Ridge finally are beginning. But it is behind Grant's original schedule, and the situation on the battlefield has changed dramatically, and Sherman is about to find that out in combat that morning.
Park historian Jim Ogden now stands forward-facing at the top of a slight rise of a mowed grassy area. Behind him are woods, to his left are 2 monuments, and as he begins to walk to his right, an open, mowed, grassy area extends some ways to his right toward a taller knoll with cannons on top.
What Sherman began to learn, and specifically initially it was what John Corse learned, was that overnight the Confederates had adjusted their position and had actually taken advantage of the detached and semi-detached hills here near the northern end of Missionary Ridge to make this a very strong defensive position. When Corse's men had lined up for the attack that morning, they were attacking where they had last seen Confederates the night before, in a line of works built along this spur of Tunnel Hill that juts out from the highest knoll of the hill. And Corse's small brigade of just over 900 men will attack forward through the ravine or draw between Billy Goat Hill and Tunnel Hill and up the slope of Tunnel Hill, driving the Texas skirmishers back, who themselves are surprised that there has been an adjustment in the Confederate position, and Corse's men, as they charge up the slope towards the increasingly visible Confederate earthworks along this spur, those earthworks abandoned, and the Corse's men tumble into those earthworks. What they then realize is the Confederates are to their right, further south along the spur of the ridge. Overnight, Patrick Cleburne and William Joseph Hardee had adjusted the line, positioning troops on another knoll or rise to the east of this position, on a spur that juts out to the east from Tunnel Hill, And they had bent James Smith's brigade back at right angles, with the point or the angle in Smith's line being on the very top of Tunnel Hill. And with Confederates positioned there in open woods and an artillery battery on the top of that hill, which now takes Corse's men under fire, Corse is forced to now turn his brigade. And as the monuments here to the regiments of his brigade represent, Corse now has to reorient his brigade from facing mostly east and turn it and face southward. And Corse's men reorienting into multiple lines, 3 lines of skirmishers before the main battle line. They now turn south, and they're essentially going to be draped over this spine or spur of Tunnel Hill. And then they're going to attack southward towards the Confederates on the top of the hill.
Park historian Jim Ogden now stands forward-facing at the top of the very high knoll of the mowed grassy area. Beside him, on either side, are bronze cannons mounted on 2-wheeled carriages. Behind him are woods at the edge of the clearing.
While some of Corse's skirmishers will push up within just a few yards of the Texas line here and the guns of Sweat's Mississippi Battery, Corse's main line never made it this far. They really don't get beyond that line of monuments where we started out a few minutes ago, where the Iowa Monument stands today. But some of Corse's men, skirmishers, did push up close enough that it tempted Confederates to come out of their crudely constructed field fortifications and attempt to capture, or actually capture, some of Corse's men. But those men of Corse's skirmish line that had gotten within just a few yards, when they realized they could make it no further, took shelter behind logs and limbs and trees that are on the slope of the hill, and they will stay there much of the rest of the day. Corse's main line, though, will fall back to the line of abandoned Confederate field fortifications on the open spur. And the men, with what tools and equipment they have, will rework those works just a little bit to provide them some protection. And Corse's men will remain in that position throughout the day. But while that initial assault by the Federals is unsuccessful in breaking the Confederate line, other Federal units begin to move towards the assault as well. And they are going to be oriented more to attack the western face of the Confederate position here on Tunnel Hill. Other Federal units moving out from behind Billy Goat Hill to move out and attack across what were then the large open fields of the Glass Farm.
Park historian Jim Ogden has moved slightly to his right, again forward-facing at the top of the very high knoll of the mowed grassy area. In front of him is a bronze cannon mounted on a 2-wheeled carriage. Behind him are woods at the edge of the clearing.
The open woods and the nature of the forest here on Tunnel Hill, and the fact that it was the latter part of November and the heavy rains of October and November having beaten the leaves off of the trees, the Confederates positioned here on the top of Tunnel Hill can actually see out into the large open fields of the Glass Farm. The next Federal unit to attack was the 4 Regiment Brigade of John Loomis's, under the command of John Loomis, the left regiment of an Irish regiment from mostly the Chicago and northern portion of Illinois. That Irish regiment, many of those men believing that they were rehearsing for the Irish independence movement, will move forward across that field. And they're intending to attack this position, but the volume of Confederate fire from this position and the next hill to the south is such that they never really make the turn and will move over and take shelter along irregularities in the ground just short of the East Tennessee and Georgia Railroad Tunnel, where after it has come out of the western portal of the tunnel through Missionary Ridge. To support them, 2 regiments of that portion of Adolphus Bushbeck's brigade, a brigade of the 11th Corps of the Army of the Potomac that has been sent down here as reinforcements to the Chattanooga area. 2 regiments, the 27th and 73rd Pennsylvania, will be sent forward across those fields as well. And they will attack in amongst the buildings of the Glass Farm. And as they move up and occupy those buildings, the fire started by the Confederates to the main house of the Glass Farm really takes. And through much of the action in late morning and early afternoon, the Glass Farm burns to the ground here on the battlefield. One of those regiments, a mostly Philadelphia area outfit, the 27th Pennsylvania, will attack up the slopes of Tunnel Hill and will be some of the first Federals on this western face to make it near the top. Despite Patrick Cleburne's reputation as a great battlefield commander by the end of the war, and a great practitioner of the defensive arts, Cleburne's line here is not always perfectly positioned. In fact, it is too high on the hill in most cases, and it leaves a dead space or a dead zone on the slope of the hill. And the men of the 27th Pennsylvania will take shelter behind that dead space. Soon thereafter, Matthias's and then Rom's brigades will attack up this hill as well. Each of these assaults not making it all the way to break the Confederate line, but being blasted to a halt, and hundreds more Federal soldiers taking shelter on the irregularity of the terrain on this western face of Tunnel Hill. By late afternoon, some of the Confederate regimental and brigade commanders on this sector of the line grow concerned about the sheer number of Federal soldiers who are now sheltering just yards away from the Federals, or the Confederates. In fact, in some cases, the Federals are so close that Confederate soldiers can use rocks to throw down on the Federals. It is proposed that a counterattack be launched, and a part of Alfred Cummings' Georgia Brigade will be used in that assault, passing through an opening in the Confederate line just a little bit to the south. They move out onto the forward slope and begin to sweep. Their first effort is not that successful. They will then reorganize and try a second time, joined by some of the Texans from this part of Smith's line, and the Confederates will sweep out onto the slope, into the flank of the Federals sheltering on the slope of the hill here, and swinging around the slope, some of the Texans moving all the way down to the bottom of the hill. They're rounding up about 400 Union soldiers with the halt of that Confederate counterattack or sweep of the slope of the hill. The Confederates will move back into their position. The Federals will reorganize. Unknown to them, the situation in the Battle of Missionary Ridge had changed a little bit further to the south, and that word begins to come just shortly before dark, and then spreads after dark amongst more of the Confederates on this part of the battlefield. But what was supposed to be Grant's main effort, the attack on the Confederate right, has been stymied by Sherman's limited assaults throughout the course of the day and by the exceptional use of this terrain by William Joseph Hardee and Patrick Cleburne and the hard fighting of the Confederates on this part of the battlefield.
The images shown throughout this program are audio described as follows. Image number 1, a black and white photo of Union Major General Ulysses S. Grant, forward-facing, with dark hair and full dark beard, wearing a white shirt, black necktie, dark blue vest, with his left hand placed inside the vest, and a dark blue Union General's coat, with 2 stars within the shoulder board on the shoulder. Image number 2, a black and white photo of Union Major General William Tecumseh Sherman, body slightly facing right and head turned to the left, with dark hair and full beard, wearing a white shirt, black necktie, and a dark blue Union General's coat. Image number 3, a black and white photo of Union Major General William F. Baldy Smith, standing with right hand on the back of a wooden chair, body slightly facing left and head turned to the left, with thinning hair and graying goatee, wearing a dark blue Union General's coat, with 2 stars within the shoulder board on the shoulder. Image number 4, a black and white photo of Union Major General George H. Thomas, seated, body slightly facing left and head turned to the right, with dark hair and full graying beard, wearing a dark blue Union General's coat, with 2 stars within the shoulder board on the shoulder. Image number 5, a map of the battlefields of Chattanooga, Battle of Lookout Mountain, and Sherman's Crossing of Tennessee, September 23rd through 24th, 1863, compiled and drawn by Edward E. Betts, Park Engineer, 1901, with blue lines indicating Union positions and red lines indicating Confederate positions. Image number 6, close-up of the Betts map, showing Union General William T. Sherman's position on the north and south banks of the Tennessee River at the crossing at South Chickamauga Creek. Image number 7, a black and white photo of a wooden pontoon boat as it rests on a 4-wheeled wagon frame in a clearing. The boat measures approximately 22 feet in length. In the background, another wagon and tent are visible at a line of trees. Image number 8, a black and white photo of Union Brigadier General Morgan L. Smith, seated, head and body slightly turned to the right, with dark hair and full dark beard, wearing a dark blue Union General's coat, with 1 star within the shoulder board on the shoulder. Image number 9, a black and white photo of Union Brigadier General John E. Smith, seated, body slightly facing right and head turned to the left, with light hair and full dark beard, wearing a dark blue Union General's coat, with 1 star within the shoulder board on the shoulder. Image number 10, a black and white photo of Union Major General Hugh Ewing, seated, body slightly facing left and head turned slightly to the right, with dark hair and full dark beard, wearing a dark blue Union General's coat, with 2 stars within the shoulder board on the shoulder. Image number 11, a black and white photo of wooden pontoon boats stretched across a river with wood planking on top to create a pontoon bridge. Image number 12, a color photo of the Tennessee River. The photo will zoom in to the mouth of South Chickamauga Creek on the south bank of the river. Stacks of large rocks are placed on the left bank at the mouth of the creek, and the remainder of the bank is covered in thick woods. Image number 13, a black and white photo of Confederate Brigadier General James A. Smith, seated, forward-facing, but head slightly turned to the right, with full dark hair and full dark beard, wearing a gray Confederate general's coat. Image number 14, a black and white photo of Confederate Major General Patrick Cleburne, seated, body and head slightly turned, with thick dark hair and full dark goatee, wearing a white shirt, black necktie, dark vest, and gray Confederate general's coat, unbuttoned, with 3 stars within a wreath on the collar. Image number 15, a black and white photo of Confederate Lieutenant General William J. Hardee, seated, forward-facing, with thick gray hair and full gray goatee, wearing a gray Confederate general's coat with 3 stars within a wreath on the collar. Image number 16, a black and white photo of Union Brigadier General James Lightburn, seated, forward-facing, with light hair and full dark beard, wearing a dark blue Union general's coat with 1 star within the shoulder board on the shoulder. Image number 17, a black and white photo of Union Brigadier General John Corse, seated, forward-facing, with head slightly turned left, with full dark hair and trimmed beard, wearing a dark blue Union general's coat with 1 star within the shoulder board on the shoulder. Image number 18, close-up of the Betts map showing Union and Confederate positions at the northern end of Missionary Ridge. Image number 19, a color photo of the open, mowed, grassy area on Missionary Ridge, zooming in on the taller knoll with cannons positioned on top. Image number 20, an extreme close-up color photo of 2 bronze cannons mounted on 2-wheeled carriages at the top of the taller knoll. Image number 21, a black and white photo of Union Colonel John Loomis, standing, head and body slightly turned right, with left hand on sword handle on his belt and right hand placed on a wooden table, balding, with thick gray English mustache and gray goatee, wearing a dark blue Union officer's coat with gold eagle insignia within the shoulder board on the shoulder. Image number 22, a black and white photo of railroad tracks leading toward a tunnel within a tree-lined ridge. Image number 23, a black and white photo of Confederate Brigadier General Alfred Cumming, forward-facing, with thick dark hair and thick dark mustache and soul patch, wearing a white shirt, black necktie, and dark civilian jacket.